Hello and welcome back to Vault Holocron, where today I will tell the story of what if the Grysks invaded the galaxy. This what if works heavily off of the canon Throne books by Timothy Zahn, and so I would recommend that you read them for this video, or at least watch a summary video for them. I will briefly explain everything which you will need to know from those books now, but if you've read them I would really recommend you skip this bit. Skip to the timestamp seen on screen to skip the explanations. First, I will explain the Chiss Ascendancy. The Chiss Ascendancy was the aristocratic, oligarchical nation of the Chiss. They resided within the unknown regions and were generally isolated from other species. The Ascendancy was run by its ruling families, to which Chiss could be born or adopted into. They navigated the unknown regions using navigators called Skywalkers. Skywalkers were Chiss children born with the gift of third sight that were used by the Chiss Ascendancy. Third sight was false precognition, which allowed them to avoid obstacles when travelling through space. The Chiss were at war with the Grysks. The Grysks were a sentient species of which little was known. They were thought to be nomadic. They had an empire, the Grysk hegemony, and were powerful, having conquered many worlds and people. They would take down societies from the inside and out, using vast numbers and manipulation. They could manipulate people so well that they would sooner die for the Grysks than be captured. The Grysks would destroy their ships and commit suicide whenever they lost a battle, so that their enemies could not get any information on them. Now I will explain Admiral Aralani. Admiral Aralani, previously Arisi Aralani, was an admiral of the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet. She was a great tactician with good instincts. She and Thrawn came to know each other at the Taharim Academy and became friends. Now I will explain Eli Vanto. Vanto was from Lysatra. His family owned a shipping business. He became an Imperial cadet in order to work towards becoming a supply officer. However, upon meeting Thrawn, his career was brought off track and he ended up ascending the Imperial Navy ranks with Thrawn. Upon the request of Thrawn, he left the Empire to join the Chiss Ascendancy in order to help them in the war against the Grysks. He was tasked with dealing with codified facts on Skywalkers. Now I will explain Brierly Ronan, a male who was a colonel for the Galactic Empire under the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research. He was the assistant director for Project Stardust. However, after working with Thrawn, he ended up agreeing to go to the Chiss Ascendancy. He did this with great mistrust of Thrawn though. Next, I will explain the Magus, the female ruler of her species. She could connect to the Force, which she referred to as the Beyond, to see into the near future. However, when she connected with the Skywalker Chiri, they were able to see further into the future. Now I will explain the Star Flash, a weapon owned by the Stibler family. It was operated by 20 people, and when used would send a large blast of tachyonic and lightspeed energy at a star, which would in return send a far more powerful blast back. It was used on the planet Scylla's sun by the Chiss when the Chiss was attacked by an unknown enemy. The weapon caused Scylla's sun to dim, and in the decades after, forced the Chiss to move underground and to live there. Finally, I will explain Thrawn. Well, some of the stuff from the books anyway. He was born Kivu Raw Nuru, but was later adopted into the Myth family, and after that given the suffix Odo, coming to have the name Mithra Nuru Odo. He first worked in the navy of the Chiss Ascendancy and ended up fighting the Grysks for them. Eventually, he was exiled as part of a plan to try and get the Empire's help against the Grysks, or to distract the Grysks away from the Ascendancy. It was not intended for Thrawn to stay with the Empire for so long. Now, let's get to it. Okay, so I'm going to set the scene for the what if. This story starts a few years after the Ahsoka show. Thrawn is in a Republic prison after attempting to retake the galaxy with the Imperial remnants. For this, he worked with Captain Pelion. Ahsoka and Sabine are in the main galaxy, and were back in time to help defeat Thrawn. Thrawn was defeated relatively quickly by the New Republic because Ezra was able to warn them of his return. However, this battle was expensive for the New Republic and weakened their armies. In prison, Thrawn has heard whispers that a few groups of Chiss have entered the galaxy and have made pleas to the New Republic. He suspects that this means that the Grysks have finally overpowered the Chiss and won the war. With this, Thrawn awaits his opportunity to bring the fight to the Grysks. Princess Leia has been given the job of being a diplomat between the New Republic and the Chiss. And now, let's begin. Thrawn sat in his cell watching the movements of the guards around him. He noticed that they were off routine, and so predicted that someone important had come to visit the prison. Leia made her way towards Thrawn's cell. She didn't like that things had resulted to this, but the Chiss was set on the release of, or at least the easy communication with, Thrawn, and so she was heading to Thrawn's cell. The Chiss had told her about the Grysks and their threat to the galaxy, and now she would have to determine if the Grysks really were a threat to the New Republic, and whether the Chiss were right that Thrawn was the only hope against them. Leia stepped into the room which contained Thrawn's cell. His cell had a room to itself as an extra layer of security. Thrawn was facing the wall, looking away from Leia. She opened her mouth to speak, but was interrupted before she got the chance to say anything. "Leia Organa, I presume," said Thrawn. Leia was taken aback by this. How had he known that it was her? He hadn't even looked. However, she kept her composure and quickly responded, "I've come here to ask you some questions." Thrawn replied, "I have a few of my own to ask you too." Leia responded, "I will be asking the questions. So, what is it you've come to ask me about?" "The Grysks?" asked Thrawn. "Yes, now tell me, what do you know of the Grysks?" said Leia. Thrawn stated, "The Grysks are a species from the unknown regions. They are said to be nomads, which travel with more ships than you could comprehend. It is said that they are great warriors, and take victory over their enemies with their great numbers." Leia responded, "I do not want to hear stories. You have fought the Grysks, have you not? Tell me, what do you know of them?" Thrawn replied, "You do well not to hold too much faith in stories. The Grysks are like no enemy you have ever fought. They study every aspect of your society, your culture. With this, they twist the minds and hearts of billions. Such control that those beneath them choose death over betrayal. They will tear apart your government from within and from outside." Leia held still for a second, allowing the information to sink in. Then she replied with a hint of anger in her voice, "So you are telling me that the Grysks will attack us, and that we do not stand a chance?" Thrawn replied, "The Grysks will attack, I know that for certain. As for whether you stand a chance, I do not have enough information. Tell me, what is left of the Chiss?" Leia responded, "All I will say is that your people were defeated by the Grysks. Now, you have every reason to want the Grysks destroyed, so tell me, what strategies do you know that we can use against them? How do they fight? You don't understand, do you? They fight using the people they conquer. To fight the Grysks, you'll need more than a few battle tactics from me. You'll need people that can think on the fly, adapt, innovate," said Thrawn. "And I suppose you think that you're the one for the job," replied Leia. "Well, it seems that the Chiss certainly think so. That's why you're here, is it not?" stated Thrawn. Leia responded, "I'm here because you've fought the Grysks before, and I want to be prepared." Thrawn replied, "When the Grysks do attack, and they will, I ask that you come to me." With that, Leia left, with much to think about. Leia made her way back to Coruscant to speak before the Senate about the potential threat of the Grysks. Not long after arriving, thousands of transmissions came in all at once from many different systems. It took some time getting bits and pieces of information from people here and there, But Leia managed to work out what was happening. Around the galaxy, hundreds of planets had suddenly waged war towards each other. With everything happening all at once, she knew what this must mean. The Grysks. Admiral Aralani forced her way into the military meeting. Everyone in the room was scattered and yelling. Aralani stood on top of a chair and shouted, "Listen to me!" The room fell silent as each person looked in shock. What was this Chiss doing there? And what right did she have to tell them to listen to her? Aralani continued, "I am Admiral Aralani of the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet, and I tell you now that these attacks are the works of the Grysks, the ones who destroy my people. But the attacks come from all sides. How could the Grysks do this?" said Admiral Akbar. "I don't know, but think about it. The attacks can't be anyone else. It's too clear that they are coordinated," said Aralani. Suddenly, a hologram of a map appeared in the center of the room. All of the attacks worlds highlighted in red, and all of the attacking worlds highlighted in yellow. All the attacks pointed inwards. In the weeks following, the attacks moved closer towards the core of the galaxy. The New Republic tried to help defend helpless planets from the attacks, but were completely ineffective. As the attacks moved closer, the demand to do something became greater and greater. With this came desperate measures. Leia approached Thrawn's cell. "You have wasted a lot of time not coming to me sooner," said Thrawn. "I have some files on invasions occurring around the galaxy. I am to escort you to Coruscant, where you will be present as an advisor." "You will be detained for the entire time," replied Leia. Thrawn was then taken to Coruscant, where he started to form a plan. Only a few hours later, Thrawn was ready to propose his plan. Thrawn stepped into a crowded room and looked out upon the audience. He knew most of them from his time studying their battle tactics. Across the audience, he saw Admiral Aralani and Eli Vanto. Vanto looked across the room at Thrawn. He had a mix of excitement and fear building inside of him. It had been so long since he had last seen Thrawn. In fact, he remembered when he had been informed of Thrawn's death. But what was Thrawn thinking? Would he even acknowledge him? Thrawn stepped forwards and stated, "I believe I have come up with a way to deal with these attacks, striking inwards from the outer rim and unknown regions. I take it you are all quite aware of the great hyperspace disaster. I am proposing that we crash ships along specific hyperspace routes. This should cause emergencies of debris along many planets, and so severely delay or damage any attack forces. In addition to this, it would act as a threat. I have here a rough sketch of all the areas we should hope to attack. As you can see, hut space would be left completely unharmed. However, it would not work on the planets in the unknown regions. But that should not matter, as we will have greatly diminished the forces we must deal with." "But that would be genocide," shouted Admiral Akbar. "I do not make this decision lightly. I understand the devastation. You have your reputation, and so I propose this. Should you accept my plan, you will publicly enlist me into the upper ranks of your military to help deal with the Grysks. Then, once the plan is executed, you can place the entire blame on me. Say I acted of my own accord, which was out of line," said Thrawn. "We will not condone this under any circumstance," replied Akbar. "Perhaps not, but it does seem like your best bet," responded Thrawn. Thrawn made his way towards Aralani and Vanto, looking at Vanto's upgraded uniform. He noticed that Vanto looked to be angry. "Greetings, Admiral Aralani and Commodore Vanto." Aralani responded firmly, "You have abandoned your people. You weren't there, and now we are refugees." Thrawn replied calmly, "I had hoped to build a force capable of fighting the Grysks. However, that plan did not work out." Aralani replied, "You fought for the Empire, not the Chiss." Thrawn responded, "I was doing both. Anyway, now is hardly time for this." "Your plan can't be allowed to happen. Too many people would be killed. Lysatra is included in your strike range. My family would die," interrupted Vanto. Thrawn responded, I understand the devastation it would cause, but I see no other option. Vanto replied, why not do one hyperspace disaster as a threat, and only fire more if the attacks continue? Thrawn replied, that would give them too much time to work around our plans. Plus, what happens if they then jump to attack the core immediately rather than working their way in? I think that these attacks are designed to weaken our forces so that the Grysks can move more actively to take the core by themselves. Vanto replied, there's got to be something. Thrawn then said, I wish there was. Now tell me, what did you find with your work looking at Skywalkers? Vanto replied, there's a lot more work to be done in regard to working out the causes of third sight. However, I have found that it is not completely random when a Skywalker loses their third sight. Comparing the age at which Skywalkers lose their ability with medical records suggests that at a certain age, Chiss bodies initiate the downregulation of midichlorians. This downregulation is linked to reduced third sight ability. This also seems to work with another factor, the death of midichlorians. It seems that the overexertion/overuse of third sight can cause their death. Finally, Chewie lost her third sight only around a year after her contact with the Mages, suggesting that connection caused the early loss of third sight. Speaking of the Mages, it seems that the Grysks have come to possess her, interrupted Aralani. Thrawn then asked, has the Navigators Guild been destroyed? Aralani replied, yes, but it was not by my hand. It seems that the Grysks destroyed the guild to force the Ascendancy to use Skywalkers. They then exploited our use of the Skywalkers to steal them. And before you ask, no, we did not end the Skywalker program. It was forcefully ended with the Grysks' victory, but not before. You should know that the Ascendancy was never going to approve of such an action, and in fact, neither do I. Thrawn then asked, could you send me all of the information the Chiss accumulated since my disappearance? Hopefully I can come up with some ideas on how best to fight the Grysks. Years earlier, in the months after being left with the Chiss by Thrawn, Ronan had learned a lot about the Grysks, and was decently proficient at the Chiss language, Chun. He noticed that the main issue with facing the Grysks was that it was hard to get information on them, since they destroyed their ships whenever they lost. With this, Ronan proposed to work with Chiss scientists to create a weapon that would resolve the problem. After months of work, Ronan developed the radiation bomb, a weapon which would destroy all life forms on a ship in an instant, but leave any machines untouched. The issue with this weapon was that it must be placed within the interior of a ship, and so the Chiss would have to open up holes in Grysks ships using acid breacher bombs. The Chiss were able to use the radiation bomb for a while, and accumulated lots of useful information on the Grysks. However, the Grysks quickly adapted, using methods to prevent the weapon's use, such as designing chips to be resistant to the bomb by containing its blast in specific areas, and by developing new behaviors, such as self-destructing earlier. Over the years of war between the Chiss and the Grysks, the Chiss were able to secure some victories from the information they had obtained, but eventually the Grysks started to make huge advances, becoming almost unbeatable. It was like they could see into the future, suggesting that they had the Magus on their side. A couple of weeks passed since Thrawn had proposed his plan. The attacks were relentless, and the work done by the New Republic to stop them had been completely useless. With this, hesitantly, the New Republic accepted Thrawn's plan. Akbar entered the room Thrawn was locked in. The New Republic has agreed to enact your plan. You are to receive the rank as Temporary Admiral of the New Republic. Then, once we have dealt with the logistics, your hyperspace attacks will happen. Thrawn smiled and said, good. I do have one request though. Commodore Eli Vanto of the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet has a great mind. He sees patterns where no one else does, and would be the best person to calculate the hyperspace routes. Akbar responded, he among many will work on this attack. Not long after the meeting, Throne was publicly given the rank of Admiral, and a week after that, the hyperspace attacks were launched, and hundreds of worlds lied in ruin. Not long after the attacks, the New Republic publicly announced what had happened, blaming Throne for acting of his own accord, and demoting and arresting him. Throne was placed within a decently sized suite, allowed visitors, and given full information on the course of the war. His first visitor was Eli Vanto. Vanto stormed into the room. How dare you? How dare you make me plan the attacks which would strike my own family? Shouted Vanto. Throne replied, I apologize for your personal attachments, but you were the best person for the job. You can't let your personal connections prevent you from doing what is best. Vanto responded, I'm not so sure it was. The number of attacks from the Grysks has dropped drastically for now, said Throne. And at what cost? Retorted Vanto. You of all people should know that I value lives. It saddens me that things had to be this way, said Throne. Vanto then left. Later, Aralani visited. I am glad to have you back. Our people could have done with your tactical insight. Perhaps the ascendancy would still be standing, said Aralani. Throne pursed his lips and replied, Perhaps, but we would not have won the war, only been stalling. I had hoped to fight the Grysks with the full might of the Empire, but the efforts of those people in there had that government overthrown and replaced. The New Republic is not built to combat the Grysks. Aralani then responded, Well, I will not go quietly. Throne then said, I will get our people through this war. We will triumph over the Grysks. After the war is over, I will show you around the galaxy and show you the art and rich history of each planet. Aralani replied, I would like that. On that happy note, Aralani left. Throne was then tasked with determining the next steps for the New Republic in order to best prepare them for the Grysks' next attack. Meanwhile, the public demanded Throne's release, finding his plan to be genius and the best course of action. As things would happen, only planets in the colonies, the core and the deep core, were in a fit enough condition to participate properly in New Republic politics, and with those in the center of the galaxy often feeling a disdain towards those further out, a disdain only grown further by the Grysk orchestrated attacks. Many of them had little issue with the mass death which had occurred. All they cared about was their own safety. Throne then came up with a plan, and so was called into a meeting. Throne stepped forwards and announced, It seems clear to me that the Grysks' next attacks will be on some of our most important planets, such as Coruscant. I propose that we implement planetary shields onto as many planets as possible. This way we can defend planets from random Grysk attacks, even if we don't have forces there. Leia then responded, This would be hugely expensive for the New Republic, but would be possible. However, many of the planets we would be installing shields on rely on imports from other planets, so we would have to implement a system to allow that to happen. Throne replied, I have thought of that. We should create an algorithm which decides which planets we provide resources to. This way it will appear that we are selecting planets randomly, making it harder for the Grysks to plan an attack to exploit our supply imports. Admiral Akbar then said, We shall take your proposal into consideration. It would be best if we hold our military proceedings in many different locations. We do not want to have to return to Coruscant every time. The Grysks may be able to exploit the frequent opening of the planetary shield. In addition to this, I should like to be a part of the war effort. With your permission, I should like to be given charge of the Chimera and allowed to take part. My battle tactics would be useful to your operation, said Throne. Only a few days later, Throne was pardoned and given charge of the Chimera. The Republic military also put in place planetary shields on many planets, and gave out the plan for when each planet was to have imports or exports. Systems were grouped and then given only 2 ships, which had the clearance to open up the planetary shield. Thrawn then sent out all of the methods to combat the battle tactics of as many species as he had studied that could end up fighting the New Republic. He also gave his tactics against the Grysks species, but was aware that the Grysks would likely have adapted their strategies over time. This all happened just in time, as Grysk forces amassed above Coruscant. However, their weapons could not penetrate the planetary shield, and so they left after the New Republic's forces amassed above Coruscant to attack them. Over a few months, the planetary shield system was working quite well. However, the Grysks were tearing through Republic ships, costing the New Republic people and ships. But, even worse than this, every now and then the Grysks would force their way into a key Republic ship, gaining a code to open a few planetary shields and taking a few planets. With this, codes had to be changed and a new algorithm generated. The reports indicated that ground attacks from the Grysks were orchestrated by the Nogri species, which were extremely capable warriors. It was clear that the New Republic was merely stalling, and at that rate, the Grysks would soon be victorious. However, Thrawn had a plan. Within the systems which Thrawn was assigned to was the planet Arcania, the freezing planet home to the Arcanians. Like all of the other planets Thrawn was assigned to, Thrawn had studied Arcania, learning about its history and the Arcanian species. The Arcanians had a rich history in genetic engineering, having done it for thousands of years, and were well known for their production of biological weapons. In many places, the planet was quite dark, due to the Arcanians using their infrared vision to see, but luckily for Thrawn, he too had infrared vision. When Thrawn arrived on the planet, he was escorted towards some of its leaders by individuals belonging to a genetic offshoot species off of the Arcanian species. The negotiations with the Arcanians would not be easy. The Arcanians believed themselves to be genetically pure and so superior to all others. They were generally very intelligent and expected complete obedience from any visitors to their planet. Thrawn would have to bow and flatter them. Thrawn entered a room filled with high-ranking Arcanians. He bowed until he was told to rise and speak. What an honor it is to serve the Arcanians. I pledge to protect you from the Grysks, which is why I stand here before you today. With the current strategy proposed by the New Republic, it is only a factor of time until the Grysks take over. However, I will not let this happen. Your people are the best in the galaxy when it comes to the production of biological weapons. I would like to give you the medical records my people stole from the Grysks, so that you may produce one now, said Thrawn. One of the Arcanians stood up and stepped forwards. We can produce your weapon, but it would cost a great many credits. Thrawn then responded, you would be paid handsomely. The Arcanian then spoke again, 5 billion credits. Thrawn then replied, I agree to your terms. Thrawn left the planet, now uncertain as to how he would ascertain the credits. Sure, the New Republic had 5 billion, but it would be a hard sell for Thrawn to convince them to part with it. Still, that was only part of the plan. He would also need to find a way to get the biological weapon to the Grysks. Thrawn called a meeting with Mon Mothma, the Chancellor of the New Republic, and with Leia. In her position as Chancellor, Mothma had emergency powers which would allow her to provide the 5 billion credits without any democratic process. Thrawn had decided to bring Leia along to help convince her. Thrawn had studied Mothma in the past and knew about the dodgy characters she had worked with and funded in the past during desperate times, and so hoped that she would hear him out. For what reason have you called this meeting? Said Mothma. Thrawn replied, I require funding for a weapon against the Grysks. Mothma then responded, I hope this time your plan isn't so destructive. Thrawn replied, no, quite the opposite. I have spoken to the Arcanians about having a biological weapon produced to use against the Grysks. Mothma then responded, "The Arcanians, that will be a high price. How many credits did they ask for?" Thrawn then replied, 5 billion. 5 billion? That is a lot of credits, especially in a time of war, in which we are hemorrhaging credits, stated Mothma. Leia then said, "It may be our best chance against the Grysks. We should consider it." Mothma then said, "I will consider this proposal. Should I decide to spend the credits, I shall do this directly." After the meeting, Thrawn then prepared to propose the next part of his plan. From the ground attacks, it had been made clear that the Noghri were in league with the Grysks. This was the weakness Thrawn would exploit. However, he would have to pass his plan to recruit the Noghri through the New Republic military. He knew he had better wait until the biological weapon had been produced, since no doubt if he mentioned his plan to recruit the Noghri before it was made, he would be forced to make the Noghri outright attack the Grysks, a move which would not work. The Grysks would not fall victim to a revolution, since they had beaten too many in the past. No, any mutiny would have to be subtle to get past the Grysks, but the New Republic surely wouldn't see that. They would waste the opportunity for a momentary victory. So over the next few weeks, Thrawn would keep quiet and wait for his weapon to be made. Mothma did pay the 5 billion, and the weapon was made. After only a couple of months, the biological weapon was ready. However, many more planets had been taken by the Grysks, and the New Republic was struggling greatly. Thrawn collected the weapon and then called a meeting with as many military leaders as possible. "I have called you all here to discuss a plan of mine to potentially turn the tides of this war against the Grysks. In secret, I ordered the creation of a biological weapon to be used against the Grysks. The bioweapon is a mixture of viruses designed to each assemble proteins which will come together to produce a product that will cause motor damage. The viruses themselves are pretty harmless and are designed to avoid the Grysks' immune system, and so the Grysks won't even realize that they are infected. The product then should slowly build up and target their motor system, first causing minor symptoms such as tremors, and after 4 months causing severe debilitating symptoms and death," said Thrawn. "In secret?" shouted Admiral Akbar. "You should not have done this without consulting us first. However, now that it is done, tell me how you intend to get this biological weapon to the Grysk forces," said Crix Madine. "I intend to use the Noghri. I once saved their homeworld, Onaga, from a spill of trihexylophene 1138, which was destroying their environment. They have since been honor-bound to me," said Thrawn. "So, you have kept this information to yourself this entire time. The New Republic is bleeding, and you hide this. We could have had the Noghri attack the Grysks from the inside. Think about how many lives we could have saved. It's like you want the New Republic to struggle, so that once this war is done, you can dive in and seize control," said Hera. "I only care about victory over the Grysks. They destroyed my people, and if we're not smart, they'll destroy the galaxy as well. There is no room to trade lives unnecessarily. The reason I have withheld this information is because I knew that that would be your idea. Sure, it would secure a short-term victory over the Grysks, but inevitably we would end up right where we are now. With my biological weapon, we stand a chance of doing far more damage. We just need to be patient," replied Thrawn. After much debate, it was eventually decided that Thrawn would go to Onaga to negotiate with the Noghri. If the negotiations were successful, the biological weapon would be handed over. When Thrawn arrived at Onaga, he did so in a cloaked ship and made sure to subtly land on the planet. He knew that it was very likely that the Noghri were also honor-bound to the Grysks. That was the way of the Grysks, abusing cultural traditions for their own good. It would just be a matter of getting the Noghri to honor their debt to him over theirs to the Grysks. Thrawn made his way into a Nogri village. A Nogri rushed towards Thrawn and bowed, saying, "Thrawn, you have returned." Thrawn replied, "I apologize for not returning sooner. I take it your people are doing well." The Nogri then said, "We are." Thrawn then said, "Tell me, what is your name?" The Nogri then responded, "My name is Kabarak." Thrawn then replied, "I should like to talk to you about what has happened in my absence, most notably the Grysks." Kabarak then said, "I will call a meeting." "No, I would like to keep things on the down low," interrupted Thrawn. Thrawn spoke with Kabarak, learning of the Nogri's relationship with the Grysks. It turned out that a couple of years prior, the Nogri had a problem with pirates attacking their world. It was then that the Grysks arrived and stepped in to protect the Nogri from the pirates. After some questioning, Thrawn found out that the pirates had stolen some of the Nogri's crops. However, the crops were very inexpensive in the galaxy due to being extremely common. No good pirate would steal them. Thrawn shared this with Kabarak. Also, the Grysks arrived quickly and suddenly to solve the Nogri's troubles. In addition to this, Thrawn heard that the pirates put up no fight against the Grysks whatsoever. Thrawn told Kabarak that he suspected that the Grysks had orchestrated the attacks. Explaining his reasoning, Kabarak believed Thrawn, but explained that to have the other Nogri renounce their allegiance to the Grysks, he would need evidence. Thrawn then asked for a record of the attacks, when they happened, when the Grysks arrived to fight each of them, and the details for each, such as how many ships arrived. Thrawn took this information, left Onaga, and headed to meet with the Steadfast. Once aboard the Steadfast, Thrawn headed to meet with Aralani and Vanto. Aralani asked, "How did things go with the Nogri?" Thrawn replied, "As I suspected, the Nogri were honor-bound to the Grysks. It seems that the Grysks protected them from pirate attacks. If I can prove that the attacks were orchestrated by the Grysks, then they will revoke their service to the Grysks and serve me. That is why I am here. Vanto, I would like you to study this data. I am looking for patterns in the attacks, movements, which would suggest the battles were pre-planned, and I would like you to compare the time that the Grysks arrived to the time it would take to jump to the planet through hyperspace routes from local inhabited systems." Vanto could not look Thrawn in the eyes, but replied, "I will get to that immediately." Thrawn then said, "You are still upset with me. Now is not the time to let something like that get between us. I would like you to join me on the Chimera, so that I can head to the Nogri as soon as possible, once you are finished." Thrawn then turned to Aralani and asked, "How many Skywalkers are left?" Aralani responded, "Not many, and the ones we have are not in practice." Thrawn then replied, "I want the Skywalkers we do have to be trained and prepared." Vanto stepped onto the Chimera. It was much more run down than when he was last on board, but something about it felt like home. He was upset with Thrawn, but deep down inside he understood Thrawn's hyperspace attacks. He often wondered how his parents were doing, but would quickly remove those thoughts to focus on the war. After a few days, Vanto had reported to Thrawn, saying that he had produced the evidence and made it into a presentation for the Nogri. Thrawn headed to Onaga immediately and presented the information that Vanto had produced. It showed how it was logistically impossible that the Grysks had arrived to Onaga so quickly for each attack, and how in each attack the battles were clearly just an act, and how ships moved in untactical ways so that the battle could play out in a certain way. With this, the Nogri were adequately convinced, and so agreed to help Thrawn. Thrawn then handed the Nogri the samples of the bioweapon, and told them how to distribute it. He told them to pretend to still be loyal to the Grysks for a while they distributed the bioweapon. He then told them that one of the Nogri was to kill the Magus. However, he told them that the move would be a sacrifice of the individual's life, and that the Nogri would have to kill the individual member to keep their cover as being subservient to the Grysks. Then, upon a signal, the Nogri would engage the Grysks in combat. The Nogri would have two goals: protect Skywalkers and deactivate any self-destruct mechanisms. With the Nogri's position in the war established, Thrawn headed to meet with the New Republic military leaders. He had now figured out his final plan, the one which would end the war and finally beat the Grysks. I have called you all here to discuss our final actions against the Grysks. I believe that I have worked out a way that we can defeat the Grysks for good. I have given the bioweapon to the Nogri, and this will be administered soon. However, this will not be enough on its own, as too many Grysks are likely to survive, and so it would only delay the Grysk attack on the New Republic. I have a Chiss weapon on the Steadfast, which I intend to use to wipe out a large number of Grysks. It will cause great collateral damage though. After I use this weapon on the Grysks, I predict that they will flee towards their main base of operations. We will then follow them there to attack. This will be the signal for the Nogri to engage the Grysks in combat. We will board the Grysk ships containing Skywalkers or Nogri in order to rescue them. The goal will be to completely remove the Grysks' access to Skywalkers in order to potentially strand them in the unknown regions. I take it you have been informed of the Skywalkers. They are navigators used by the Chiss to navigate the chaos of the unknown regions. We can use them to follow the Skywalkers being used by the Grysks when they make their escape. Also, we can use them to determine which ships have Skywalkers on board to be rescued, said Thrawn. We have only 14 Skywalkers ready. That's not much of an attack force, replied Ar'alani. I have done some research. I proposed that we could use others as Skywalkers. During my time in the Empire, Vader was able to use Third Sight whilst working with me. I believe that those who you call Force sensitives would be able to access Third Sight with instruction. The individuals I have found are Luke Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren, and Grogu, said Thrawn. Luke Skywalker then responded, I agreed to the rescue mission, but tell me about your Chiss weapon. Thrawn then proceeded to explain his plan and the weapon in detail. One last thing, we need to leak to the Grysks that we plan to change the planetary shield generators on Coruscant. So long as the Grysks believe that they have got the upper hand, by recovering information that they believe we do not mean them to have, they should gather in large numbers above Coruscant. I believe that some Chiss in this refugee group here, he pointed to a dot on the map, are under the influence of the Grysks. If we have Ar'alani go to them supposedly very low on troops, and in need of more, they will send in spies, said Thrawn. After much discussion, the New Republic agreed to Thrawn's plan and started making preparations. 3 months later, everything was in action, and the New Republic gathered above Coruscant, its planetary shield down, awaiting the arrival of the Grysks. The Nogri had played their part, having killed the Magus. Everyone sat in their ships, their hearts beating fast and loud, and sweat pooling. And then, it began. The Grysks entered with the largest attack force anyone in the New Republic had ever seen. Vanto was in control of the Steadfast, and Ar'alani was on her own private ship, with 19 members of her crew. She began preparing the weapon. The New Republic forces moved into position, firing on the Grysks. They had to stall the Grysks until the weapon was ready. On 19 of their ships, Skywalkers and equivalents reached out through the Force, connecting to the Skywalkers on the Grysk ships. On the surface of Coruscant, officials prepared to put up the planetary shield as soon as they got the signal. The Grysks were dominating the battlefield, and were starting to notice Ar'alani's ship, moving on autopilot, not firing. Luckily, the Grysks were shooting with bad aim, the shaking from their motor damage interfering with their war effort. In fact, the shaking was the only thing preventing the Grysks from completely obliterating the New Republic forces. They started making their way towards Ar'alani's ship, and then, "The weapon is ready," called Ar'alani through the comms. Coruscant's planetary shield launched into action, and the New Republic's forces micro-jumped out of the battlefield. Before the battle, Thrawn approached Aralani in private and said, "I am trusting you to lead the second half of the plan. I have full confidence in you." Aralani replied, "No, I will go. You said it to me before. You know the galaxy. Show our people a new way of life, like you found a new way with the Empire." Aralani activated the weapon and said through an open channel, "This is Admiral Aralani of the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet. Prepare to face the wrath of the Chiss Ascendancy." A huge blast of tachyonic and lightspeed energy launched from Aralani's ship at Coruscant's sun, and in return, the sun fired an even greater blast of energy back. The weapon was found by the Chiss many years ago. "It's called the Star Flash," said Thrawn. The blast swept through the entire battlefield, vaporizing everything it touched. The planetary shield over Coruscant held for just a few seconds, and then buckled under the pressure of the energy bombarding it, subjecting Coruscant to the power of the weapon. The New Republic ships returned to the battlefield, finding everything in ruins. The Skywalkers reached out through the Force. Just 3 Grysks ships remained, each with a Skywalker. Soon they disappeared into the vastness of space, and not far behind them was the New Republic and Skywalkers. In only a few hours, each of the New Republic ships would arrive at what they hoped would be the last battle of the war against the Grysks. Eventually, they arrived to find another large fleet of ships. Thrawn was right, it was the unknown regions. "You wouldn't happen to have another one of those Star Flash weapons, would you?" said Han Solo. "My people only ever found 2, replied Thrawn. Inside the Grysks ships, the Noghri made their move, brutally attacking the Grysks, who were caught very much off guard. The New Republic Skywalkers located the ships with other Skywalkers, and the New Republic began boarding Grysk ships. On board one ship was Luke Skywalker. He dealt with the large numbers of Grysks easily as he made his way to the Skywalkers. Around him he saw piles of dead bodies, some Grysk, and many Noghri. Luke wondered to himself if he would ever know anything other than successive wars. On other ships, Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra had similar thoughts to Luke. Din Djarin and the Mandalorians fought aboard one ship, using their Mandalorian combat skills to overpower the Grysks well enough to rescue the Noghri and Skywalkers. With the combined New Republic effort, eventually pretty much every Skywalker had been saved, with only a few dying. However, a huge toll was paid by the Noghri, their numbers reduced to maybe 1/100th of what it had been. Many Grysks survived on the ships, as the New Republic had only staged rescue missions. They didn't have enough forces to completely beat the Grysks, but a rescue was possible. With as many Noghri and Skywalkers saved as possible, the New Republic forces left the battlefield, having won the war. The Grysks left would most likely never be able to attack the galaxy again, since they had been infected and were suffering from motor neuron damage, which would greatly impede them, and because they were stuck in the unknown regions, with no Skywalkers or navigators. To navigate their way out, they would have to make jumps and hope that by pure chance they made it into the galaxy. Even then, it wouldn't be possible for them to amass a large attack force again. Of course, there would be a few pockets of Grysk activity throughout the galaxy, but without orders, they would be aimless and easy to defeat. The New Republic forces landed on Coruscant, everyone cheering. Everyone ran around hugging each other in excitement. Thrawn stood back and smiled at the joy emanating through the room. His mind then went to Aralani. Her sacrifice had made this possible, and for that he was grateful. But it hurt him to know that she was gone, not able to experience this celebration and complete victory. Vanta approached Thrawn and said, "I know you and Aralani had a history. I'm sorry for your loss." Thrawn smiled gently and responded, "As am I sorry for yours." With victory over the Grysks secured, the New Republic began the long road to recovery. Many of those who had served the Grysks killed themselves, but many more returned to their ways before the Grysks. In the outer rim, mid-rim, expansion region, and inner rim, planets worked hard to repair the damage from the hyperspace attacks. Coruscant itself suffered greatly, the blast from the starflash having wreaked havoc on the electrical systems, and having caused the deaths of millions on the upper levels. The damage upon the planet's upper levels meant that a lot of richer people had died or been affected. This would surely lead to great disdain against the New Republic from the wealthy and influential. The Chiss began to rebuild their society from the ruins the Grysks had left it in. Their society would be very different though. The old family system would not survive, for too little members of each family had survived. However, much worse than that, the Skywalker program would likely take decades to recover. That's if it even did. The Chiss would likely not travel the unknown regions for many years. Chiss numbers were so small that the chances were that nowhere near enough individuals would be born with third sight. In addition to this, very few remained to teach the Skywalkers or caretake them. However, Kobo Rick Ardok did survive, and she finally proposed to meet her brother, Thrawn. Many Chiss found work across the galaxy. As for the Noghri, they went back to their peaceful life on Onager, with greatly diminished numbers, but eternally grateful to Thrawn, who had ensured that as many of them as possible had survived. Eli Vanto headed back to Lysatra to see what remained of his family and home. The Chiss Vonya went with him. Thrawn was placed under arrest by the New Republic, but given a luxury suite, unlimited visits, and very few limitations. However, many members of the Republic demanded Thrawn's immediate release, accrediting the victory over the Grysks to him. Thrawn himself began thinking of his next moves. Extreme times meant that people would be looking for extreme politics. However, overall, across the galaxy was a sense of relief and joy. That's it for What If the Grysks Invaded the Galaxy. If it's really wanted, I could do a sequel on Thrawn's attempt to seize the galaxy with the Empire. I hope you enjoyed the What If. I had hoped to include complete storylines and arcs for Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Lando, Ahsoka, Ezra, Sabine, Hera, Zeb, Akbar, Ronan, Aralani, Vanto, Chiri, Vonya, and Kobo Rick Ardok. But it was far too difficult for me. Plus, the video would have never come out if I tied up each loose end. Anyway, thanks for watching, and bye.